Hi, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Lowdown on Low Code, a mostly weekly podcast brought to you by your friends at analysis.tech. Welcome, and thanks for joining. If you like what you hear, you like the content, hit the like button, hit the share button, tell your friends and neighbors. Lowdown on Low Code is all about informing the low code community. That's what we do here at analysis.tech. So today I'd like to welcome two friends, one friend from a long time ago and one new friend. Benjamin Baer, welcome.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
And Linda Crowe, welcome to the Lowdown on Low Code. I'm going to give a little bit of
Thank you.
Great to have you here, Linda. I'm going to give you a little bit of a preamble here because we occasionally have done episodes about what is commonly known as decision intelligence. This is a branch of digital process automation that is very important and we think is becoming more so. It essentially is the automation of decision making within a process. And this technology and this approach has been around for a long time, but for most of that time, it was used by financial institutions, very sophisticated kind of financial institutions for, loan adjudication and things like that, and high volume marketing. But as we get into the AI era, it's becoming very apparent to us that more and more companies are going to be employing decision intelligence in their digital process automation strategies. So we're very happy to have Benjamin and Linda here to help us understand the latest and greatest of what's going on in this field. And Benjamin and Linda have recently established a new firm called DecideWise, which provides a lot of resources about decision intelligence and a community. We at analysis.tech have joined DecideWise and are participating in the community. It's a really cool and really useful new venture. So guys, we're really happy to have you here and grateful to have you help us understand what's going on in decision intelligence. And with that preamble, I will finally introduce my co-host and my partner and my friend in baseball and music and many other things, Rick Greenwald. Rick, welcome.
Thanks, John. Always a pleasure to be here.
So,
let me introduce myself for a moment. Should I do that, John?
Yes, please.
My name is Rick Greenwald, as John mentioned. I've been in this business for a while. My most recent stint was about 10 years as the senior database analyst at Gartner Group. And I've been in the database field basically my whole career. So later on, we'll be talking about data a bit as it relates to decision intelligence. And that is my meat. And with that, I'll turn it back over to John. Well, let me just turn it over to Benjamin and Linda. That probably is the best way to go about it. So as I mentioned, I've been in this business for a while. I think you guys have been. Linda, obviously, just a couple of years, but we've all taken a route as we've gone, as technology has changed and as we have changed. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd be really interested in hearing about your journey, how you arrived at this point, what brought you here, and what interests you about this area.
Yeah, so I'll start. I've been in the information technology space for all of my career. I started in sales, spent most of my career in marketing, starting in product management and rising up through the ranks and ultimately leading marketing for a couple of different companies. And had a short 5-year hiatus working at IBM, building out the IBM Tech Exchange community. And so I come at this, this startup, understanding all phases of the revenue facing functions of a business. And about a year ago, a little over a year ago, Benjamin and I had met for coffee, and we started talking about what was going on in the data space. My last job was in data and analytics. Obviously, at IBM, I spent a lot of time in data science and decisioning. And so we started talking, and what we realized is that there's an intersection between community and data-driven decisioning. And as we continued to have conversations, we realized that there was a gap in this space for decision-based professionals and decision-based line of business managers who really want to understand and learn from each other. And so that was the inkling and the sort of kernel of inspiration for DecideWise. Benjamin, I'll let you take over.
Thank you. Yeah, so Linda and I have known each other for a very long time, but at the risk of exposing my age, where my gray beard and thinning hair don't do it already for me, I started even before I met Linda at Sun Microsystems. I started at SGI even before that. So advancing through many, many companies and many technologies, making the transition from hardware to software. About 15 or so years ago, made the transition from pure technology vendors into the data and analytics space by joining a company called Fair Isaac Corporation,
Mm,
or FICO, as many
sure.
people know their FICO score. But most of FICO's revenue is generated through what we now would consider decision intelligence. At the time, it had a different name, decision management. Before that, it was expert systems. But the concept is, at the end of the day, is how do I operationalize my analytics? I can, gather data. I can analyze that data. Today, I can, build an LLM and query that data using an AI. At the end of the day, how do I then take that data and use it in automating my business process and to create consistency and speed of scale and digital twinning and simulate my business environments, et cetera. And so, that's really what I guess you could say is the state of the art at FICO. They've been helping financial services and insurance companies do this for the credit lifecycle and for the claims processing and underwriting process for years and years and years. So having gone through that and helped FICO build what they today call the FICO platform, which is a platform solution for doing this, it dawned on me that almost every business process can use this kind of methodology and this kind of state of the art, but really very few industries outside of maybe financial services and insurance do it. So, that kind of led to the conversation with Linda about how can we grow the overall TAM for all the companies, and there are hundreds of companies in this space, in the broad data through AI and application development space. How can we increase the TAM? How can we increase the exposure of all these other industries and use cases to this state-of-the-art technology? And that's kind of where we started talking about community. How can we build a center of excellence
Mm.
that includes both vendors and buyers and implementers and users of these technologies, to talk about what makes them different, special, and what the best practices are in terms of making this work?
That's awesome. Thanks, guys. So let's talk about the community for a minute. You've got vendors. In my experience, I used to cover FICO, and that's how Benjamin and I met. FICO encourages a community of its customers, and there are other vendors out there doing the same thing. But then there's the customers themselves who basically are part of a financial community or whatever. How do you organize a community where you can really have open dialogue and the vendors don't dominate? For example, maybe talk to us a little bit how you've thought that through and designed the community to address
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, well, so a community is the strength of a community really lies within its members, and not within the sponsors, right? The the value, pardon me, the value of community really is in the community conversation. That conversation is already going on. There are vendor communities, and there's a conversation that's going on about that vendor's products and that vendor's services. But there's also then the conversation that's going on in the general marketplace about all of the vendors in that space. And if a vendor comes in and wants to try to dominate that, then the value of the community goes away. So it really is about being a good community member and promoting that.
Mhm.
The DecideWise community, because we are a free community for members to join, and the focus is on practitioners, decision makers, economic decision makers. We want those conversations to be forward. It really is all about how can we bring these professionals together, not to talk about, the siloed single vendor solutions, but really where those solutions need to then integrate with other technologies. There are a lot of people who have experience with all of these different technologies in this vast landscape that understand point pieces of how these technologies work together and how you build different systems with different solutions in order to meet specific use cases. And that's the conversation that we really want to focus on. Vendors are not necessarily going to be the experts in how their technology integrates to other technologies. That's going to lie within the member community and within the practitioners. So that's why we really want to get to those people that really understand the technologies. They understand the business reasons why they chose those technologies, and they understand the business value that they're getting from using the technologies and driving strategic business decisions. So that's really where we're focused with DecideWise.
Got it. Benjamin,
Yeah,
anything you'd add?
Well, the only thing I would add is that today, if someone were to ask about best practice for integrating the technologies, finding the right data, which models work, what are the traps and tricks for making these kinds of solutions work, they really have one of two choices. They can go to an unmanaged community, for all intents and purposes, a threaded community like a Slack or a Reddit or a Discord. And really, you lose all the searchability, you lose a lot of the focus, and you have to, manage a conversation around what car should I buy versus, the conversations go off the rails. On the other side, you can go into a vendor specific community, and there you've already made a decision about the technologies you're going to use and the implementation you're going to have. And it's a lot less about how do I find best of breed or how do I make that work with something else. And so
Yeah.
we kind of see this managed IT community in the middle that just so happens to be focused on decision intelligence. But this kind of managed, focused, maintained, moderated community as having a tremendous amount of value in between those other two, to both weed out the noise, make it searchable, make it moderated, but also not wedded and dedicated to a very particular kind of implementation.
yeah.
Thank
This
you.
is
Rick, over to you.
Yeah, we mentioned the word earlier that this is a neutral community, but I think that's not exactly the right term. The sum is neutral, but the individual pieces are very diverse. And
Yeah.
talk about diversity, there's strength in diversity, but even more so, there's wisdom in diversity. That you can find the little nugget that the person over here found through hands-on hard work and how it applies to you and how it can be shifted. Everyone learns. The sum is greater than the parts, and it's just a virtuous circle. So the other thing to comment on this is that, of course, we've been in this business for a while. We all know what the real secret is. It's not technology; it's the people implementing the technology. Not many years ago, I went to a talk on client-server computing. That'll date me. But I remember a guy stood up to give a talk on his success, and he said, "I'd like to thank my boss for me being here because he didn't fire me the first 2 times I did this and I failed." And this is the sort of exchange that people can be immensely helpful to other people. But having said that, maybe we can talk a little bit about the technologies that are involved, because even in the subset of data and analytics, there's lots of stuff going on. So if you wouldn't mind
Yes.
talking about that a bit, that would be terrific.
Sure. So I should tell you that one of the main value benefits beyond the community within DecideWise is a vendor and product database that we're building, or we've built. It's currently got about 350 companies in it, but I have a list right now of another 50 or 60 companies I got to add to it. So it's a
Right.
growing database of vendors. that cover this decision intelligence umbrella, if you will, that includes everything from data and data management, streaming analytics, descriptive analytics, your CRM systems and Tableau and Domo and those kinds of vendors, predictive analytics or advanced analytics. So companies that, like SAS or FICO or others that are developing specific analytics to solve particular problems. AI and LLMs, we've actually broken that out, AI solutions and LLMs, I should say. So we've broken out all the LLMs that we can find, as well as a lot of very interesting AI solutions vendors. Rules as an orchestration engine for those analytics. Optimization, the original AI, optimization and constraint-based analytics. And workflow and low-code solutions. I should say it's application development, not specifically low-code, although there are very particular and definitive benefits of low-code in this environment. I've also included digital twinning and simulation vendors as a standalone subset. We've considered, and ultimately, as we start to gain more traction, I expect that people will be asking about authentication technologies and authorization technologies, mobile application development technologies, maybe even databases. But I think that's the way we've constrained it today, is that umbrella of data management through application development.
Right.
Awesome. A brief.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt. There is one other thing we've also included on this, and it only just dawned on me because we do have a slightly different definition than some of the industry analysts. We actually have a category for what we call platforms. And I hope we get an opportunity to touch on that. There are vendors, and I know that Gartner, Forrester, IDC, they're actually separating out what they call decision intelligence platforms, separate from all those other vendors. So that's another category of vendor that we also cover with a unique spin on it. But I should probably point that out as a different category
Benjamin,
of technologies.
I just published some research related to that where we talk about how do you future-proof yourself, because things are always changing. And the idea is that you make your commitment to a platform that can include many different things now and in the future. That's the only way to go about it now. And if you choose not to look at that, you're putting on blinders and limiting the benefits you can get.
Well, on one hand. On the other hand, we can have a long conversation about what a platform is. So I should tell you the DecideWise definition that I came up with is slightly different than what other people come up with. And here, this is the same problem we have with AI solutions or AI powered. If I included everyone under the term platform because they call themselves a platform or because they call themselves AI powered, they're an AI solution, then it would just be every vendor. So I went about coming up with a differentiated definition for it. And so I have these categories: data management, descriptive analytics, predictive analytics, et cetera. I suggested that a platform is a vendor solution that delivers on at least 3 of those capability areas. So you're not a rules platform unless you also do optimization or application development or descriptive analytics, et cetera. And I don't mean to pick on the rules vendors, but they tend to call themselves platform more than the others. But that's kind of the way that we've categorized what a platform is. It's something that does a little more than just their stuff.
I think that's perfectly appropriate as long as you put in the caveat they either offer that themselves or have an open architecture that allows them to be integrated. I mean, the solution is going to be that without a question.
Well, that's
Sure.
one of the potential benefits that I see in the way that you guys have approached this, in that there are a lot of companies that use FICO stuff or IBM stuff, and they are platforms. They incorporate multiple functions, but they're particularly with coming out of AI, there are these point solutions or, very, very specifically targeted solutions. They're not platforms, and that's okay. You still want to be able to know about them so you can decide whether or not they're appropriate to bring it to your architecture and what would be involved, to adding them to their architecture. It just seems to me that the industry, there's a lot of innovation and ferment going on, and the smaller vendors are just as relevant. I mean,
It's not even just the smaller vendors, though. I would hazard to suggest that they're in the data science business. there are very few greenfield opportunities.
Mhm.
So yeah, I can get a platform vendor that requires me then to think about interoperability integration with my existing ETL tools or my existing streaming analytics solution or something else to aggregate on. In the same way, if I want to go best of breed, yeah, maybe I can find one best of breed component within a platform, but it's very just as likely that if I'm going to build my own solution or build to best of breed, that I'm going to be picking from 5 or 6 vendors that I then need to make work together.
Right.
So at the end of the day, integration, interoperability, and identifying what's best of breed and what's best practice is still the open-ended issue that isn't going to be addressed necessarily by a specific vendor community. This is something that we want to address and have to address in a broader agnostic community.
You bet.
Great. Hey, let's take a brief commercial pause here to remind folks who are, if you dialed in, you're listening to the Lowdown on Low Code, brought to you by your friends at Analysis.tech. Analysis.tech is a boutique firm completely devoted to low code and low code development, the low code market, etc. Rick Greenwald is our data guy. I am, if you don't like the term low code, you can blame me. While I was at Forrester, coined that term. We have Rob Koplowitz in our group, expert on digital process automation. Dave Marcus, expert on digital process automation, really, really good on channel strategies. Francis Carden, the godfather of RPA, and we are here every week, just about every week, doing this podcast. But we also help customers advance their strategies. And with that, look us up on analysis.tech. Real simple. And with that, we'll return to the conversation. Benjamin, you had mentioned that part of your scope is application development, and the reason we got involved with DecideWise is because you've included low code application development within your picture, your scope of the market. Talk to us a little bit more about that. Why do you think low code is important? Do you think it's more important or less important than coding as an approach? What are you finding in the community, about low code and where it fits?
Well, so I should first clarify, we've included as many application tools as we can. It just so turns out that, there's 110, 120, actually even more than that, 130, 40 low-code vendors. We have included as many of those as we can as well. But there is a unique value around low-code and no-code solutions. And I can't tell you how many times I've run into vendors or customers who've programmed in C++ or Python or some more traditional application development environment. And then when they need to make changes to their model or make changes to their logic, they have to wait for the application development guy to come free in 3 months, and maybe they'll, change the code. At the end of the day, it's about change management. I think that's the most important and most fundamental value that low code provides, particularly to decision management. In decision management, you're model centric. So you're looking at an analytic model, you're looking at an AI model, you're programming a set of business logic, and you want to orchestrate that within an application framework. Those models change all the time. Models fall out of favor. They just don't deliver what you need, and you want to be able to change those analytic models, but not break the application every time you do that. I've run into at least 2 or 3 customers who are looking to modify and change their logic depending on what their simulated environments tell them, maybe 1-2 times a day. Well, I can't go back to my application development guy and change the code 2 or 3 times a day. But in a low code environment, because it's orchestration, I'm not worried about breaking my UX. I'm not worried about breaking the application logic, just change an underlying model. And so change management becomes, one of the biggest drivers for what I think is driving the low code in adoption within decision intelligence. But I think even more fundamental is when we talk about operationalizing analytics, we're talking about delivering it in a framework that somebody can use. Right. And that use case is almost always an application. So I think those two go hand in hand.
Do you also find that I mean, the business experts, there are people who understand the constraints of automating, say, loan approvals or claims approvals or not. And those people are usually not software developers. They are business experts. They work in the and the. Do you also find that that low code allows them to play a much more fundamental role in the creation and ultimately the change management of the solutions going forward?
Well, yeah. So I think of all the many organizations I've run into, it's always this question about where's application development within the organization, and it brings up an interesting point because traditional application development is usually an IT function. And you have to call on an IT resource to do that. So low code, because it's a lot more approachable, a lot easier to use, a lot more straightforward in terms of how you're orchestrating services. It's something that can be integrated into a line of business construct or line of business organization a lot more fluidly. But I don't think that that's an exclusive thing. I think that a lot of organizations have also hired their own C++ guys within the line of business organization. All these organizations are different. I don't expect that a line of business manager is even going to touch low code. It's possible, but I think that they're far more interested in the outcome or the simulation or the dashboarding that comes out of that. But it certainly provides, I think low code environments provide a lot more flexibility in where that resource is located and how you train them, how quickly they can get up to speed, how applicable it is. It's a lot easier to look at a low code development environment, and figure out the logic from someone else than it is to go through, C++ code and go, why did the developer do this? So there's a whole knowledge management piece of this. There's all sorts of other ancillary values. I don't mean to take away from those when I say that I think one of the biggest is change management, however.
Yeah,
So absolutely, you're right.
totally agree. Rick, over to you.
Yes, well, yeah, I hear the talk about applications, and I am, as John mentioned, the data guy. Data, the rock on which all is built, the foundation. How do you help people involved in decision intelligence work with data properly? Because even though decision intelligence and analytics don't have to deal with the really gnarly issues of concurrency and multi-user access, there's still an enormous amount of stuff like data governance and ensuring the data is correct and combine data from multiple sources. What do you do in that area?
So Linda's probably going to laugh when I give my answer because she's heard this so many times, and she's increasingly part of these conversations from someone who isn't, so is steeped in decision intelligence. So the concept and philosophy around decision intelligence is going to throw data science on its head. We don't start with data; we start with a decision. And I find that when you talk, and there's a lot of terms for this: decision first methodology, decision first ideas, business outcomes. There are a lot of different ways of thinking about this. But the philosophy is you don't start with the data. And I know as a data guy, you're probably
No,
now turn me
I
off.
don't disagree with that. I mean, I think it's a silo when people are doing that. As long as
Right.
someone takes care of it, as long as that's being
Sure.
done.
So I found in my time in data and the analytics business that there's an awful lot of consulting being done to figure out, once you've got the problem resolved, how then do you find the right data to be predictive for that? Rather than the old world, remember 15 years ago was all about Hadoop. Let's build the biggest data lake we possibly can, and then we'll figure out what value we get from it. Decision intelligence,
Don't
as I
get me
said,
started. Go ahead.
decision intelligence is about asking, what business outcome are you looking for, or what problem, what decision do you need to make, and then who owns that decision, what analytics can you use in that decision, what kind of workflow and approval logic have to go into that, and then at the end of the day, based on the predictive, where are we going to find the right data? So it's about, in the old world, it was about finding the needle in the haystack. In the new world, it's about just identifying the needle.
Yeah.
And so, that has created a major mind shift for a lot of people entering this field. I spoke to a graduating business class at San Jose State last week, and I told them, look, data science is going away. With all due respect, it's becoming decision science. You need to figure out what question you're going to ask before you figure out what data you have. And then there are a lot of process you can go through to figure out the most predictive data for that. But it's got to happen in that regard. And I think in a world of more than enough data, more than data we ever wanted. And frankly, in a world of AI where I can query that data on a moment's notice and it's very easy and very simple and super accessible, the time of learning, query language is over.
Well, I don't even hate you for that. No, we are actually singing the same song, Benjamin, because I think a lot of times people talk about being overwhelmed by data or too much data. What do I do? The problem is not data. The problem is data management. How do I find the right data? What are the characteristics of that data? Do I have to change them? One thing that drives me crazy, John has heard me say this over and over again. People are like, we have too many copies of data. And everyone I've talked to about that, they don't have copies of data. They have versions of data, which have different correctness and different meanings. And the problem that you're talking about for decisions is which version should I use? And by the way, the software that comes to the rescue here are catalogs, and especially catalogs with AI augmented search. This can be a massive help.
Well, so I have news for you. Having come, as Linda and I did for the last 3 days, through a startup expo, and we listened to startups, we're hearing an awful. I mean, everything is AI powered, as I said. I'm not using AI powered descriptions in anything anymore because everybody is. The big topic of conversation is agentic AI, and I'm really starting to peel the onion on agentic AI. The data problem is the problem.
Oh, yeah.
So let me just back up for a moment and just level set on this. LLMs are text prediction engines. They don't actually have fundamentally an inherent service. They can't do anything. They can just query an LLM. So agentic AI, the promise is I'm going to ask it to do a task for me. Hey, book a trip to Montreal, get me in a hotel, make sure I have a rental car, and I want tickets to the Met, whatever. Agentic AI is the promise that I'll be able to ask the LLM or ask the agent to do this for me. It'll go off and do it. That requires that it's able to interoperate and connect with executor LLMs or executor agents on all these services. So it'll know the booking agent, it'll know the hotels that I like, it'll know the ticketing for the airlines, et cetera. And it can go off and query all those databases and come back, negotiate the service, and give me the request. That's extraordinarily complex. It's easier to do within an enterprise with a private LLM. But if you start thinking about public LLMs, now all of a sudden, how do I make sure that the data that's unique to me, including my credit card numbers, my social security numbers, my maybe healthcare data, doesn't leak into all of those LLMs? How do I make sure that classified data within an organization that's only seen by a certain group and it's authorized only to a certain group then doesn't become leaked to the entire LLM? So the data security and data authentication issues that spin out of this whole concept of agentic AI are massive. And I have to tell you today, there is no solution for this. So there's a lot of smart people looking at it, but there's no way to solve this.
There are small subset. Because what you were just talking about, I use in a broader context. John knows what word is coming now. It's the context. That LLMs have no understanding of context whatsoever. That's not what they do. So the agentic AI says, as the agents are going to provide the context for it to allow them to make better decisions, because LLMs will never be able to get individual context right. That's not how the technology works.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, the data leakage issue here and the data access issue here is enormous.
Well, yeah.
And today there are no ways to solve this. It's a big problem.
Even if you solve that, the data correctness problem, how do we make sure it's correct in my context? Hey, if the data is wrong, sorry, I'm a data guy, but it kind of doesn't matter everything after that,
Yeah.
And what it means for data to be right is not something that you can easily define, because it's all dependent on the context of the user case.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Linda, obviously Benjamin mentioned that DecideWise advocates a decision first approach to these applications. Um, what other points of view do you put out there for folks? I'm thinking, for example, going back to the discussion we had about the industry. Do you advocate at some point that a client, that a customer start to favor platforms or start to approach integration of multiple technologies as opposed to using best of breed? I'm just curious what other points of view that you bring out into the community.
Well, it's not about Benjamin's and my point of view. It really is about the point of view of the community members. And we made a decision early on that we are agnostic about what technologies are important in this space, what new use cases need to be considered, what solution sets, what vendors are on the rise, et cetera. What we want to do is be the sounding board for people to come and have those conversations, and for that conversation to organically emerge alongside what's happening in the market.
Mhm.
Benjamin and I were just at this conference, as he mentioned, the last 3 days. 3 years ago, if we had attended that conference, it would have been all about data decisioning and analytics, data science. I don't think there was a single presentation that we heard in 3 days that did not include something about AI, agentic AI, AI management, et cetera. This is definitely something that's happening. Will we have that conversation in DecideWise? Absolutely, because our community members will be talking about those things. But that's not because we're leading that topic. It's because that's what people are promoting and what they want to talk about and what they want to connect with other community members. They want to learn from each other.
Right.
So we've made that conscious decision not to offer up our recommendations. We want the thought leaders in the space, the people who have the experience hands on with these technologies to be the people leading that discussion.
Right. Thank
And
you.
I think at the end of the day, that the whole what tool do I use for what job, what use case? I mean, that is an inherent part of value in the community. There's probably no
Yeah.
use case that hasn't been tried by somebody somewhere, right? So being able to up level that conversation and have an honest dialogue about, well, we looked at these three tools or these four vendors, and this was something we valued for this particular use case, or some nuance to it. This is what we chose. This is our experience with that tool or that capability. Here's some pitfalls to look for. I mean, those are all very valuable dialogues
Right.
that I think today only happen within an organization, if that, and are not shared globally. And I think that there's an opportunity for people to raise their own profiles, their own expertise within the community context. And hopefully it leads to people getting hired and getting promoted and making more money, and growing the overall exposure to the capabilities in a decision intelligence kind of solution environment.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. I'm going to go out on a limb and predict that you guys believe decision intelligence is a growth market. Uh, why? What's driving? I agree with that, by the way. But what's driving the interest and the potential to expand outside of these, sophisticated financial, high volume marketing kind of scenarios into the broader market? What are you seeing? And the flip side of that is, if I'm working in an organization and I'm looking at expanding the automation of our processes, why what's the argument for me devoting time and investing in decision intelligence more than I am today?
Yeah, it comes back to what we talked about earlier, and that really is about businesses today are starting to take a look at not just what data do we have that can inform a decision, but let's start with the decision. What's the strategy that we're trying to implement from a business perspective? And where do we think we need to go, and what decision needs to be made? And from there, then work backwards to what data do you need and what systems do you need in place in order to be able to manage and transform and analyze that data in order to inform the business decision. So that's really where we're going. I've been in this industry for a really long time, and it always comes back to the data. What's the data telling us? And over the course of many years, over the course of decades, what we're seeing is that the ways that we can access and analyze that data become more and more and more sophisticated. I'm going to come back to another topic that we talked about earlier, and that was this conference that Benjamin and I went to for the last 3 days. AI is, definitely a topic in this area. People are looking at how can AI better inform decisions, and how can AI use legacy systems in order to be able to get to this next level of driving business strategy. So, decision intelligence is a very large umbrella of technologies that includes AI and agentic AI. Benjamin, I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I want to up-level the entire conversation. It isn't about the technology, but it's about what do you need to remain competitive or remain differentiated. And it's about, the customer engagements. It's about being consistent in what you do throughout an organization. And how many times in our careers, how many times in our viewers' careers have they thought, well, some C-level folks sit in a room, the CEO, COOs, CIOs, and they make a decision about the direction they want to take the company. And how does that really waterfall down into the organization? How does it tactically become an actionable thing in an organization? And that's fundamentally about decisions. It's fundamentally about automating as many of that process as you can. It's about articulating your value add and creating it in your organization. And that's really what this entire process is about. It's about codifying your constitution. It's about codifying your rules and laws and go-to-market engagements. I often use the example, we both know that Apple and Dell make computers, but we all know innately that the things that Apple values and the way that it flows in the organization is fundamentally different than what Dell values and flows in their organization. It's that creating that brand and creating that consistency in your engagement. It's about creating knowledge management so that if a person leaves in the organization, they're seamlessly replaced. It's about making sure your customers are engaged in a consistent and fair fashion. It's about making sure that they call the call center or check their mobile app or, check your website, that they're getting the fair and consistent offer. It's about making sure the business process work efficiently. And by the way, if there are companies out there that want to fight against this, they're not going to be around in 5 years. I mean, because their competitors are all engaging in these conversations and automating these process right now in real time. And so they're going to win out.
Another time maybe we'll have a conversation about how many companies actually know what their constitution is. Because a lot of that.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks a lot, guys. Rick, why don't you bring us home? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming to this podcast. We hope it's been informative for you. And by all means, check out the analysis.tech website. We have not only other podcasts, but lots of research, which is available for just signing up and getting it for free. You don't have to give us money. We will be doing more of these, and we will be exploring the world of low code, the world of AI, the world of agentic AI, and the world of data too. And so we look forward to your continued presence, and by all means, come along on this ride with us.
And
if you don't mind, please do sign up for a free membership in our community at DecideWise.net. Take a look at our site. It's available, and the community gains from more people accessing it, more people interacting with it. So please, www.decidewise.net.
And if
Make
you
sure you're going to the join the community button, and community membership is free. So there's a very low bar of entry.
there's some there. I mean, it's a new community, but I'm here to tell you there's some really good resources on there on DecideWise already. So decidewise.net. There are other DecideWises, which I found myself wrestling with one day. Anyway, Benjamin, Linda, thanks so much for joining us on the Lowdown on Low Code. This has been I think, a discussion that will help a lot of folks. So best of luck to
It's
you.
been a lot of fun. Thank you very much
Yeah.
for
Thank you.
inviting us.
Thanks.
Thanks
Thank you.
again.
Appreciate the time.
Be well, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.